discovered yesterday, at the Brisbane airport you can no longer check in at the airport. You have to have done that online before you get there. So it did take quite some time and a lot of conversations. So before they let me check in. Yes?
What do you do if you're not online or on the internet? What happened?
Well,
Pay the old figure. Right.
you just look them in the eye and lie. Well, I just didn't know that, I checked in Sydney Airport because I printed, the boarding pass off and, no, I don't have this or this. And then yesterday morning, a friend dropped me at Brisbane and I was trying to log into the machine that spits out your baggage tag. And I asked one of the staff, and he said, over there. And so,
We're trying to do it in Australia.
anyway, so I went to a guy and he said, well, you need to log in on your laptop. I said, I haven't got one. I haven't got one. And he said, well, use your phone. Have you got a phone? So I pulled out my Nokia. And he said, you win. And so he quickly, well, if you gave me the boarding pass, he also checked that I didn't have any of those items, didn't he? Oh well, anyway, it worked. So yes, if I don't have to use PowerPoints, I don't, because just something else can go wrong. Okay, so what it is today, I thought, and it's up to you, talking about the legal issues or elder laws that affect older people, which I can say are those of us in this room. What's interesting at the outset is to say that 65 has always been taken as the year that we mysteriously become older. But 65 was based on the fact that that's when we could get the age pension. So I'm arguing, the voice in the wilderness, that the age of 65 is a nothing age. That if we're going to talk about what constitutes an older person and use the pension age, it's 67, which creates havoc for everyone's research when they've set it at 65. But be that as it may, what I'd like to do today is start out with the points that in our textbook that we did, we started out with 4 questions. Where am I going to live? Who am I going to live with? What am I going to live on? And who could make decisions for me if I couldn't make them myself? Now, those questions are applicable to anyone. If it's a young person, where am I going to live? Well, at my parents' place. Who am I going to live with? Well, my parents. What am I going to live on? The money from my parents. And who can make decisions for me if I can't make them myself? Well, my parents. But as we age, those same questions take on, shall I say, a greater intensity. So what I'd like to do is set this chat around those 4 questions. I'm also doing a full-time PhDI through the University of New England. The I stands for innovation. And to get into the program, you have to be an expert in something. So I'm touted as an expert in elder law, but that's not enough. In your area, you have to have discovered that there's a gap, there's something missing, and you, with your great knowledge, are going to develop something, a product, that will fill that gap. So I have said that the gap is an overwhelming knowledge deficit, not only just amongst the community, but amongst professionals, about the legal issues affecting older people. And that's not in any way an insult to anyone's intelligence. It's when we are confronted with a number of these issues, the standard refrain that I hear is, I have no idea. Until I had to put mum into care, I had no idea. Until my brother ripped my dad off by using a power of attorney, I had no idea. until such and such, you know, and it goes on and on and on. So what I'm doing, and I submit sooner than I want to think about, is developing a product which is an innovative way of teaching elder law, not just to law students, because it doesn't just affect law students, but it's a multitude: nursing, medicine, mediators, social workers, physiotherapists, any number of different disciplines need to know some aspects of the issues surrounding elder law. And so I've developed this model that you can teach it. It's a bit like, though I can't say this in the thesis, a bit like the Royal Easter Show and Sideshow Alley. Every child wins a prize. You know, there's something for everyone in this model. So taking it back a step then, when we say, well, where am I going to live? So what are our options? And everything is a user pay system. So if we look at our options, for example, am I going to stay in the family home? You know, if you're a couple or a single, irrespective of what gender, you know, what are the issues associated with staying in the family home? Is it suitable for my needs? Do I live in a 2-story place and I've just had both kneecaps replaced? How am I going to manage in the home? What if I have to use a walker? How do I get it up and down the stairs? Or how do I manage the maintenance of the place? And there are many bugbears in my life, and I make no bones about discussing them. One is the media that's been going on recently about all these baby boomers in their big homes, and do you know how many thousands of spare bedrooms there are that these baby boomers could be renting out to young people? And so I now say, oh, yeah, okay, so would we get to choose these young people? Would they have to have a police check? Would they go on a residential tenancy lease? What happens when they want to have friends around? What happens in the house? Do they have a room? Well, does it have a bathroom? Does it have a kitchen? Do they cook in the kitchen? Do they clean up after themselves in the kitchen? And when their friends come around, who vets their friends? I have a list, it goes on, depending on my mood, how long the list goes on and why I don't think it's such a good idea. However, so we could stay in the family home, all things being equal, if we put certain things in place. Or else we have the children who are caring, who say things like, and I'm sorry, I always pick the female gender because I'm female. Mum, ever since Dad died, you've been rattling around in this house. You know, you can't manage the garden. There's all this maintenance that needs doing. Why don't you sell up, give us the money, and we'll build a granny flat, and you can come and live next to us. We'll be close by, and you'll have your privacy, and we're there if you need us. Now, what could go wrong with that? And I say, lots of things go wrong with that. But let's ask the questions. Darling, that sounds wonderful. Will my name go on the title? Or, darling, that's going to really increase the value of your home, isn't it? Now, what about Tom and Mary, your siblings? How do you think they'll feel about that? And how will that affect how I make it all equal in my will? How are we going to do that? And then what happens if you lose your job and you can't afford to keep the mortgage repayments going? What happens if you get promotion and you're going overseas the places we can go at the moment are getting limited. So what about just interstate? You know, and you move interstate. Will I be going with you, or do I stay with the house, like part of the furniture, the inbuilt stuff? Or what happens, and these were my favourite ones teaching young law students, what happens when you go overseas for a holiday, like you do every year? Will I be going with you? Or are there dog kennels now where they have accommodation for the older parent next to it, you know? Or what happens if I get a boyfriend and he starts having sleepovers? Are you going to say, Mum, the kids saw his car there last night and it was still there this morning. This is just not on, you know, think about it. Well, I have been. Or then what happens if the boyfriend and I decide we're going to shack up and I want my money back? Yes. And I've seen it happen. And one woman who I knew professionally, I said, don't do it. I promise you, it won't work out. And she said, oh, it will, you know, I get on, my son and I are close, and I'm thinking, well, there's the first thing, what about his wife? And so she sold up, she gave him the money, and then next time I saw her, oh, she was going away. He spent a lot of time going away, because it was actually a room in the house. And then, well, it's not really working. And so when she asked for her money back, her son was distraught, her daughter-in-law was furious, and they could afford to give her 100 grand. I don't know why they didn't have to sell their home. 100 grand, which got her a studio in a retirement village. And so these are the realities. Many years ago, the Older Women's Network and I, we were doing some brochures on, you know, this type of stuff. And we were going to start them off with, so granny flat. And when you open the trifold up, there was just one big word, don't. You know, and everything was don't. And then the head of school at the time said, perhaps you could just make it a question and answer thing rather than don't. So granny flats, and granny flats don't just affect us and the children. Granny flats affect Centrelink as well. And no matter what we seem to do when we're older, there's someone just over our shoulder, and that's the Centrelink person, telling us, well, you know, we have Centrelink provisions, we call them special residences. And we talk about what's a reasonable amount for you to pay. And if you pay more than that, we say, oh, have you heard of the gifting provisions? 10 grand a year, no more, and maximum of 30 grand over 5 years. So if you've exceeded the gifting provisions, then it's not that you don't get the pension, it's just they consider that you still have the money. And so when your means tested, they say, well, you know, you exceeded the gifting provisions by this amount. And now perhaps I will put a plug in, a good plug for Centrelink, and that is the FIS officer, the Financial Information Services Officer. I don't know if you've heard of them. Yes, no? Okay. To me, Centrelink have 3 great services that most people don't know about. The first is the FIS officer, Financial Information Services. You do not have to be a Centrelink recipient in any shape or form to get an appointment to talk to the FIS officer. They won't give you advice, and nor will I, but they will give you information. Oh look, my kids are, you know, suggesting I give them money and they'll build me a granny flat. Centrelink, the FIS officer, will tell you the implications. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's money, then the FIS officer can talk to you about you know, the information, the options, but no advice, and that makes sense. The second wonderful service they have is the ACSO, the Aged Care Specialist Officer, and that's a reasonably new position. So if it's a case of someone having to go into care and you're the daughter or the son that's organising it, then the Aged Care Specialist Officer can go through all the scenarios, go through the money, well no, they don't go through the money, they discuss the money with you, and all the options. They are absolutely brilliant. And the third one, and they've expanded the title, it's grandparent, kinship, and I've forgotten the third one, foster carers, that's right, grandparent, foster carers and kinship. And when my granddaughter came to live with me as a young teenager, and this is several years ago now, fortunately because I lectured in this, I knew about the grandparent advisor. I also knew that there were only 6 for Australia, and 2 of them were in Sydney, Penrith and Cogra. I opted for Cogra. And they were brilliant. They, or she, it was a she, just went through all the paperwork for the tax benefit, everything, and it didn't stop there. If you rang, they answered the phone themselves. You weren't on hold for 2 cups of coffee or something like that. They told you about services available for kinship, you know, provide or carers and whatever, or grandparents, whoever you were. It was absolutely brilliant. So the 3 positions are well worth, you know, knowing about, and the fact that you do not have to be a Centrelink recipient in any shape or form to make use of the service. So going back to the accommodation, so, you know, is it the family home? What if we are asset rich and cash poor? How about a reverse mortgage? When they came in years ago now, I thought, oh, that sounds good, you know, you don't pay it back. Well, you do pay it back, but a lot of people forget the second part of the sentence, which is you don't pay it back until you've died and it comes out of your estate, or until you sell the property. So what are the pros and cons of a reverse mortgage? The easiest thing is to look at ASIC's website, reverse mortgages, and watch the graph. Watch the graph go up, sort of, it's almost perpendicular, as to how much you will owe, because for those of us who did arithmetic at school, it's compound interest. So it's interest on the interest, on the interest, on the interest, and it just keeps increasing. So we can look at granny flats, we can look at reverse mortgages, we can look at staying in the family home somehow, or we could look at going into a retirement village. Now there's been such a hue and cry about, you know, these retirement village operators and the way they rip you off and all of that. You signed the contract. Did you get legal and financial advice about the contract for a retirement village? It's in the contract. It's not hidden. It's how much the deferred management fee is, or the exit, the departure fee. So one of my colleagues at one university I was at, I said, I haven't seen you around for a while. And she said, oh no, you know, I've been busy, blah, blah, blah. And we've moved into a lifestyle village. And I said, oh, how's it going? And she said, oh, I hate it. She said, but, you know, Tom, whatever his name was, Tom loves it, just loves it. And I said, oh, lifestyle village, so it's not a retirement village. Oh, God, no. She said, no, it's nothing like that. And I said, oh, what's it called? So she told me. So I Googled it. And it didn't say what it was. And I rang, of course, and said, oh, you know, I'm getting on, and I was looking for somewhere, you know, that I might like to live. Are you a retirement village? Oh no, says the woman, no. And I said, oh, so you don't come under, what's it? It's called something. Oh, I know, it's called a Retirement Villages Act. You don't come under that? Well, yes, we do, but we don't take old people. And so I rang my friend. I said, by the way, you're not in a lifestyle village, you're in a retirement village, and you'll have a deferred management fee that you're going to have to pay if you leave. And she talked her husband into leaving. Well, their deferred management fee was up to about 30% of their ingoing contribution. So sure, they got money back, but not enough to live in the nice area that they had lived in before. So when people, and I don't act for operators, though I used to, when people complain about it, no one holds a gun at our head and says we have to go and live in a retirement village. Often people will go there because their friends are there. And they say, oh, my friends love it. And I think, maybe they just want some company and they're not going to tell you what they really think of it. Maybe. I don't know. But retirement village living does suit a lot of people. And a lot of people go in knowing the signs. In which case, it's fine. But look at the village rules that are attached to the contract as well. I know people who are really, really happy in a retirement village. Many years ago now, the parents of a friend of mine moved into one because he had cancer and he wanted to make sure that she was somewhere safe, seriously. And that was fine, and he did die. And then, much later, she met a widower in the village, and they did have sleepovers. And the next thing, they had a lovely card from the committee saying, we've noticed how the relationship is blossoming. No doubt we'll be hearing wedding bells very soon. So we can have that with neighbours anywhere we live. But retirement village living, understanding that you don't own the place, it's usually a 99-year lease, well, it's what started as a 99-year lease, that there are always new retirement villages cropping up, and some people don't want an older villa in an older style village. Some people do. But it's something that we really need to think about and not be coerced by kids or friends, family or whatever. Or we can go into one of those over 55 lifestyle villages, which are totally different legislation, where you own the relocatable home, but you don't own the land. So therefore you're paying rent on the land, which I understand from someone who's just gone into one, entitled him to get rent assistance from Centrelink. So he was sitting pretty. And I think until the prime real estate that this lifestyle village is on the Gold Coast, until the owner wants to sell, then what happens? Do you all fight to get the biggest crane to lift your relocatable home to where? I don't know, to somewhere. So these are things to give serious consideration to. You know, if we're lucky, we've got, we live in a community that's a supportive community, and we've got friends, we've got people who, we keep an eye on each other or whatever it may be. But the thing is to make informed decisions. And sometimes we don't know enough about something to know what questions to ask. I always think of two particular, I always thought they were New Yorker cartoons, but I've gone through my 60 years of the New Yorker and all the cartoons, and I can't find either of them. But both cartoons had the elderly American dowagers, In one of them, they're standing outside the Parthenon in Athens, and the Greek guard is there in the full, Greek costume. And so one of them says to him, I guess there's quite a story behind this. And you think, I can understand, it's a bit like elder law, yes. And the other one is they're coming out of the theatre, they've been to see Les Miserables, and one says to the other, what I don't understand is, if they were so poor, how could they afford all those antiques? So, these two cartoons sort of guide me through elder law at times, because we can't ask questions sometimes if we don't know anything about it. I was saying to Lydia, sorry, just a while ago, that when I first started tertiary studies back in 1980, I'd never done any science, and protons, neutrons and electrons, I still don't know what they are really, but anyway, and I lived in the outback, so I went to the local high school, which only went to grade 10 anyway, and found the science teacher and asked him if he would come around to my place and give me tubes on a weekly basis. And so the first afternoon he arrived and he said, now what do you want to know? And I said, I want to know enough to be able to ask a question. And so sometimes we can't ask a question because if we don't know something exists, you can't sort of walk in and say, oh, I did do that once. Many decades ago, I was a registered nurse in an outback hospital in a distant territory. And my friends who were midwives didn't want to be midwives. I didn't know anything about midwifery, nothing. I knew it was women and babies, but that was it. At 21, I went to the charge nurse and I said, oh, so don't want to, work in mid anymore. Can you just run through it with me? And I'll come round here and work. I mean, the ignorance, the arrogance, the naivety, whatever it was. But sometimes we don't know anything about something because it hasn't crossed our path. And so how can we ask a question or even think about it? We don't sit there saying to ourselves, what should I think about that I don't know about today? It doesn't work like that. So if we look at accommodation, where am I going to live? And then who am I going to live with? And this is a bit sensitive, this bit. If we are still single or we are newly single, either through a divorce or through death of a partner, then as we age, we haven't got time on our side to recoup any financial losses. And that's with anything we do. So sometimes, are we prepared, when it comes to who am I going to live with, to put our assets at risk? What do we do if we do decide to, dare I say, shack up with someone? Do we draw up a prenup, a prenuptial? Do we raise the topic and find the option's not there anymore because the person's taken to the hills? So who am I going to live with? Am I going to live with one of the kids? Some people, we always say, those of us who work in this area, we have a skewed view of families and I guess life, because people don't come into your office, and I don't work in, I keep a practicing certificate but I don't use it. People don't come into your office to pay $500 an hour to tell you how happy their things are in their family. They come in when it's no longer happy and something's gone wrong. So as we age, the best thing that we can look at, I think, is prevention is better than cure. I don't mean not living with someone, I mean making informed decisions. If I do this, then this could happen. If I do that, or whatever. Or one of the things we did with the Older Women's Network, we did 5 brochures, or 5 trifolds, and we discovered we were actually frustrated Mills and Booms authors, because the one I did was Love at Last, and they met at tennis, and oh yes, he was madly in love with her, and he did something with hedges, you know, like hedge funds, but you know, hedges. And he was going to come and live, you know, in her house, and don't worry about it. Look, it's better, or you know, if it was renting, why don't we rent? And if you put the lease in your name, then you know, you'll be safe. And all this actually had happened to a friend of mine. And she had said, oh, I've met this guy. And I said, oh wow, you know, we were in our 50s, I think, at the time. I said, that's fantastic. Yeah, what's he do? Oh, I'm not really sure. Yeah. Oh, where'd you meet him? Oh, it was a bar. And yeah, well, that's fine. And then next one, you know, he wants to live together. And I said, oh, yeah, go for it. Go for it, all right. And so then she was a great one for canapes of an evening. He wasn't. And it was when I think he threw a plate of canapes at her and said he wanted a proper meal. That should have told her, but anyway. The fact that he didn't pay the rent should have also told her. And then she said, oh, we're breaking up. And I thought, well, that's good, you know, but don't say that, you know. I said, oh, yeah, oh. And then I said, what are you doing? And she said, oh, well, I'm leaving. I said, what's he doing? And she said, well, who cares? I said, he's not staying there, is he? And she said, the lease has expired. I said, it's called a periodic tenancy, and your name's on the lease. And you will be responsible for what? Any money. This was the end of a very long-term friendship. She said, ever since you did law, you think you know everything. Had I just kept my mouth shut, we would still be friends. But oh no, I had to say, well, certainly more than you. Yes, in hindsight, it was probably not a good response. Anyway, then through my daughter, who was close to her, some months later, when the outstanding rent for several $1,000s had to be paid, and I thought, do not say. And so that was one of my friends. Another friend lived with this guy for years and years. And she said one time, oh, I was just saying to him that, you know, I'm redoing my will, and she had 3 sons, and, you know, but I'm leaving him the car. I said, oh, what did he say? She said, we got really upset. And I said, Then the next conversation, because I've learned a bit since then, the next conversation was his father or mother, the last parent anyway, had died, and his brother got more than he did, and he was going to challenge. I said, oh. And then things were okay, and I said to her one day, you know, he doesn't work. And she said, no, and it's my home, and you know, I work. And I said, I could write his affidavit out for him now, you know, just a pretend one, and put it in a sealed envelope. And when you do break up, you can open the envelope, because he will put a claim in, and you can tell me if what I put in that sealed envelope is what happens. And she said, well, mind your own business. And so I did. And then years later, they split up. He put the claim in, and it was everything I had mentally said, you know, when she came home from work, dinner was, you know, in the oven, poured her a glass of wine, you know, did this, cleaned the house, did. She actually was very fortunate. She had a brilliant lawyer, and all he got out of it were his legal fees. But our mutual friend rang to tell me, and I said, would you say I'd really, like to catch up? And tell her, I said, Sue said she promises not to say I told you so. We are still friends, unlike with the other one. So, who am I going to live with? Am I going to live with the new great love of my life? And are we so infatuated with each other that we know everything's going to work out? And I'm sure, no, I'm told it does. I'm not sure at all. I'm told it does in lots of cases. Also though, are we going to live with our kids? Just stay with them. It's your turn to have her. She's been here 3 months. We cannot cope with her any longer. It's your turn. And what if we've only got one child? So, where am I going to live? Who am I going to live with? Or am I going to have a share house? And let's, without being gruesome, the plight of so many older single women who are homeless is something that I have banged on about for years and years, and now people are just starting to think about it. But where does an older homeless woman go? There's no shelters for older homeless women. So once again, prevention, informed, decision making. So then, what am I going to live on? Not yesterday, the day before, Monday when I was in Brisbane, I went and saw my accountant about a couple of things. And I said something about super. And he said, I wouldn't look at it just at the moment. Right, no, okay, I won't then. I won't look at what my super's doing just at the moment. And of course, once again, we don't have time on our side to make a false decision and recruit losses. As I say to students, 20, you make a bad mistake, a mistake about money. You've got, now, another 47 years in the workforce, unless AI takes over, 47 years in the workforce to recoup that loss. If we're not in paid employment, how do we recoup it and what happens? So I'm not saying just lock yourself up and wrap yourself in cotton wool and not worry or do anything. Not at all. But making it our business to find out, what are the implications? And this is why I swear by the FIS officer when it comes to financial decisions, and just making an appointment. And they are brilliant, the information that they give out. So, where am I going to live? Who am I going to live with? And what am I going to live on? Have we planned? I think the age pension, the rise in it, and it was done very gradually, every 2 years it raised 6 months. But we live much longer. We don't retire at 65 and fall off our perch at 66. We live for another 20 odd years. On what? What we grow in the courtyard at the back of our place? Or what do we actually live on? And when I look at the financial advisors and they say, to have a modest lifestyle, a single person needs this. And then they'll even say what a modest lifestyle is, going for a pub meal, once a fortnight or something. I thought, but travel. How am I going to? A bit old to hitchhike, and it's not really the thing we do these days. So we need to look at that. And then the fourth question, who could make decisions for me if I couldn't make them myself? Then we have the issue of, we call it substitute decision making. Powers of attorney for financial and legal matters, enduring guardianship for personal and health. Powers of attorney and enduring guardianship die when we die. They don't continue on for 3 days, as someone has said to me. No, I'm sorry, they don't. And so people often, and I can say that honestly, often conflate wills for dead people, wills, powers of attorney, enduring guardianship, and advance care directives. It's all right, love, I don't need one of those powers of attorney because my executor will take care of it. And I say, not till you're dead, they won't. Or vice versa, I don't need a will because I've got a power of attorney. And so we need to look at these things. Well, what are they? So, and when do we do them? I strongly believe that these are documents we should put in place when we turn 18. It should be just like a rite of passage. We can vote at 18, because why I say that is, and 99, how would I know what percentage, of people leave it until we are older, and it is the kids who say, Mum or Dad, and it can be with the best of intentions, but also it cannot be with the best of intentions. You need to have a power of attorney, and I'll be your attorney. And then the older person usually thinks two things. They think I've lost my marbles, or they're after my money. So there's no law that says we have to appoint someone as our attorney, but there are laws that say what will happen if we were to lose mental capacity and had not appointed someone as an attorney with what we call an enduring power of attorney. So powers of attorney, and they're state and territory based, so here I'm talking New South Wales. Powers of attorney can be general or enduring. A general one, and they both, you can say the same things in them, if you like. But a general power of attorney will cease to have effect if a person loses mental capacity, whereas an enduring power of attorney will continue on. It's not that it only comes into effect when the person's lost capacity. It comes into effect whenever you said that you wanted it to come into effect. So I have an attorney pursuant to an enduring power of attorney, and he is not related to me at all, and it just happens that he is a solicitor, but he's been a mate for years and years and years. And so my power of attorney, I made it to come into effect immediately, because then should I be hit by the proverbial bus and I can't make decisions, I like to say it's only a temporary state, and then he can do all those decisions. So when I say there's no law that says we have to appoint someone as an attorney, there are laws that say what will happen if we were to lose capacity and had not appointed someone by means of an enduring power of attorney. And so we can say when it's to come into effect, we can say we want a couple of attorneys, we can say how they make their decisions, we can say what they can make decisions about. We can take control of it, and we can revoke or cancel it at any stage if we still have mental capacity. I argue, though, that, well, I argue with everyone about everything, that the question that is asked of a client, as it stands when it comes to powers of attorney, is the wrong question. Inevitably, the person is asked, who do you want to be your attorney? I argue the question should be, what qualities do you want in an attorney? And you say, well, financial nous, financial acumen. Yeah, I'm right.
5 minutes to a question.
Thanks.
Did you ask me to tell you?
If they can't look after their own money, I can say the next thing because I'm Catholic, okay? Being appointed an attorney does not automatically give you financial acumen. It's not like Pentecost, where it plopped on your head and all of a sudden they could all speak many languages. No, if you haven't got financial acumen, just being made an attorney is not going to give you financial acumen. So they want financial acumen. You want someone who's available and willing to do it. It is not an honour to be appointed someone's attorney. It's a lot of hard work. You want someone that's nearby, really, because yes, I know everything can be done online. No, you can't check the letterbox online. There are lots of reasons. And you want someone who's going to advocate for you. What if, and I'm not saying do not appoint your kids, I'm saying look at what qualities you want. If your kids have got them, however, that's great. But if they haven't, I know this is being filmed. My children are not my attorney. It's as simple as that. And when they found out, I said, so, you can't look after your own money. Why would I think you can look after mine? And the subject has never been raised again. So, powers of attorney, they are really valuable instruments, but in the wrong hands, you're just giving someone carte blanche to take your money. So it's a case of really making an informed decision as to who you appoint. And also, I've often said, have the family Barbie. Invite them all around, tell them what you're going to do. And you might say, and I've decided that Tom's going to be the attorney. Because you've told me that the other kids don't care. Let the initial silence tell you how much they don't care. As they think, he's going to be looking after my inheritance. Is he going to be helping himself to it? And if you've got a few kids, and what if the parent has always paid the kids' school fees? This is the example I give. But then when the parent does the power of attorney, they don't tick the box about making provision for third parties. So the overbearing eldest child says, oh, Mary, the attorney, fees are due. Can you just write out the cheque? It's for this amount. Mary's got to say, Mum didn't make provision for it in the power of attorney. Yeah, but she always did it. You can do it. You're the attorney. So you want someone who's going to be able to stand up for you. So powers of attorney are for legal and financial matters, and they die when we die. The problem with a general power of attorney is no one has to check it. Well, no one checks up on whether it's an enduring or a general. But a general power of attorney, any one of us can download one, fill it out, and it doesn't need to see the light of the solicitor's office. Also, they don't have to be registered anywhere unless the attorney is going to use that document for real property transactions, buying or selling a place. Not the principal, but the attorney. So we need to give a lot of thought to who we appoint. And enduring guardianship, we want different qualities. We want someone who respects our values, whether we are religious, or whatever it is. I would only want to, where we'd like to be. If I have to go into care, I'm not from the country. I'm from the country, and I want a lovely facility where I can wake up to the cows and the kookaburras. But if you've appointed one kid for one thing and one kid for the other, Heartstrings, who's the enduring guardian, Heartstrings says, Mum wants a facility in the bush. But Purse Strings says, she's lost it. That one out in the bush, it costs a fortune. Have you looked to see what they charge? There's a really good one on Parramatta Road. And what's wrong with the sound of the cars, the trucks, and everything else? And she's lost it. She's not going to know. She doesn't recognise us. She's not even going to know that she's in a room with 3 other old biddies who've lost it as well. She's going to Parramatta. How do you resolve that? You go off to NCAT, to the tribunal. And so it's another case of putting thought into it. Advanced care directives are written by us, the individual, stating what care we would or would not want if we were incapable of expressing it ourselves. There's no law in New South Wales, no statutory law about advanced care directives, but there have been common law cases whereby if you meet certain criteria in the thing, that it's current, it's specific, the person had capacity and it was witnessed, then they're legally binding. So we need to think about whether we do that and make an advanced care directive. And wills, of course, are for when we're dead. Wills are not like tin food. They don't go off after a certain period of time, but our circumstances change as we get older. And so wills, I always used to say, at tax time, such a miserable time sorting out the paperwork, why not bring the will out as well and just see if it's still up to date? Why not have a really foul evening, doing all the paperwork and see if this is okay? And often they are. But births, deaths, marriages, divorces, moving interstate, overseas, coming into money, all these things are times when we need to look at our wills. And that is still giving us a few minutes for questions, if you have any questions.
I will have the microphone. If someone does want to ask a question, take advantage of Sue while she's here.
Information, no advice.
Is it right that when you go into one of those villages where you don't own the land but you own the little house, that I just can't remember where I read it, but it must be the other one, the retirement village. You have to pay for the refurbishment of the unit?
It's what's in the contract.
Ah, right.
And some places do charge it, and it can be a set amount. And this is why it varies, because you have to remember, retirement villages are a business. That's it, and some are fabulous, and they really are. They have good operators, and and people are really happy. Others, you see the sad stories, oh, it's a prison, we can't get out, we didn't know. Well, read the contract. Get a lawyer and a financial advisor to read the contract and inform you what's in it.
We run coffee groups at our U3A, and I've got a number of people in those coffee groups who have moved in, paid their $1 million, and hate it. Absolutely hate it.
There's no cutout. Like with the Aged Care Act at the moment, until July 1st, it's, the most a facility can charge is $750,000 for the RAD from January the 1st, but they can apply to the short-term first, the pricing commissioner, and give reasons why they should be allowed to charge $3 million RAD, refundable accommodation deposit. But a retirement village operator can charge what they like because it's a business. A vendor can charge. I want to sell my home for $3 million. Oh, but I haven't got $3 million. Well, don't come looking at my home.
Well, it wasn't the money so much, it's some of the people. And they're saying, when so-and-so walks down the street, we all pull our blinds down and make out like we're not living there, and this sort of thing. So they come to our coffee group to join U3A because they're so bloody lonely in this place of 300 people.
But you get that if you're the odd one out in a small community, anyway, but this is it. What do you look for? And when we buy a place, just a place to live in, how much thought do we put into it? But yes, the retirement village, but when we sell our place, that's our money. There's no deferred management fee.
You've organised a power of attorney. then you get hit by a bus. When does he get involved, he or she get involved?
Well, straight away actually, because you're going to have to pay for the ambulance.
Is the name written on the back of your licence or something? How do you...
Well, no, this is the real problem. No one even knows that we've got them. You know, it's like some people say with your enduring guardianship, you know, what you want. Put it on the fridge. What, we're all going to have a heart attack in front of the fridge? No. So it's important that if you do a power of attorney, that you do chat to your financial institution or your superannuation guy or all the people that are involved so that they know there is a power of attorney in existence.
You just said something there that was, I don't know if it was a throw-up line, but you said to answer David's question, that it happens immediately, they may have to pay for the ambulance. But what if you've got health cover and that covers the ambulance?
Oh, well,
So
then,
does it die then?
no, that's fine. Because, but then the health fund will need to know as well who's paying. Because, you know, if you've got an automatic debit, then you do need to let different people know. And quite often the third party doesn't know. I've always argued that I can understand why financial institutions might prefer their own third party authorisation. It's theirs. They know it's legal. They know it's current. How often, if any of you are attorneys for someone and you're using the power of attorney, you know, for the principal, how often does the third party ask if it's the most recent one? You know, just in conversation. Oh, right, you know, you're still the attorney, you know, no one's knocked you off the perch, ha 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 ha. Or, so there's no order from NCAT appointing someone a financial manager, you know, and you'll soon tell by the look on the person's face whether they're lying. So this is a problem. They are brilliant documents to have in the right hands, and it's up to us to make sure we put them in the right hands in the first place. And we shouldn't have to go to our financial institution to ask if they have special requirements, but it's just good practically to do it. Yeah.
Okay. I heard you talk about RADs, and we don't know very much about them. Is the aged care financial advisor at Centrelink able to advise you? Or secondly, how do you find a solicitor, for example, that knows something about it and doesn't pretend to know something about it?
Which part can I answer first? The aged care specialist, right, sorry. The aged care specialist officer will be able to explain the whole process of, you know, what the RAD is, what the deferred management fee, the daily accommodation payment, all these things. But finding a solicitor, and even the agreements with the provider, say, you know, legal and financial advice. I know in this town, every financial advisor's office you walk past, they say specialising in retirement incomes and aged care. But lawyers, you see, elder law, for many years, I was the only one in Australia who taught it at law school. Only one university and one person, me. Now there's probably 3 universities, but the New South Wales Law Society have announced recently they're going to make elder law an accredited specialty, but it doesn't start till next year, it's 26. Then you would have a real sense of comfort if someone's an accredited specialist. You know, well, no matter what it is, we go to GPs, but then we can go to specialists, you know. And the same law societies have a number of different specialties, you know, like criminal law, property law, whatever. But old people, you know, no one's ever wanted to do anything for us that's positive.
We're going to, I'm sorry, Sue, you might as well make this one the last question.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to be slightly left field and ask you about somebody travelling about. The relatives are not there. They're knocked over by a bus or hit by a meteorite.
Or space.
Oh,
Jump.
yes. And they're actually killed. The family decide very quickly that the easiest way to deal with things is to have that person cremated and bring the ashes home. And then somebody goes to the fridge to find this mysterious jolly envelope that's been there for some time and find that person wanted to be an organ donor.
This is it. And putting the fact that we want to be an organ donor in the will, or saying whether we want to be cremated or buried in the will, it's a bit late because who knows we've even got a will. You know, and just to tell you exactly it, I do a lot of wills for myself. And so I was sorting them all out one day and I came across an envelope. My executor would have died, well, pardon the pun, and it stated on the envelope, "This is not my most recent will, but for the life of me I can't remember where I've put that one." I thought, you, of all people, when did you write? And I signed and dated it. So yes, we don't know. So we need to make our wishes known. If we want people to do the right thing by our wishes after we've gone, they have to know. And so if the kids raise the subject, then we might get upset about it. But we have to be able to talk about it. And it's not easy. I mean, it can be, I suppose. But also, the kids have got conflicting views. And remember, when we die, it's left to the executor to take care of the funeral arrangements. So these are things, you know, do you do it over 1, 2, 3 bottles of sparkling wine or something, you know, to fortify yourself before you start to think about it. But in all seriousness, we do need to think about it. Because...
And tell your
Pardon?
And tell your enduring.
Yes, and tell whether it's the enduring guardian for personal health and lifestyle, the enduring attorney for legal and financial, and that they each know. Because as we say, purse strings, heartstrings. We can't keep it tucked away as a surprise because...
Well, it's not.
I've got 5 children. I sent a copy to each of them.
Yeah. And let them...
They're fighting afterwards. They know it's happening now.
Yes, and that's it. And you know, sometimes people hold it as a weapon, you know. I'm going to take you out of the will, or, you know, or don't you worry, it's my money, you know, you'll find out in due course. No, it is something we need to think about. What we do is our business, but we do need to give it some thought so that it doesn't come as an unpleasant surprise. And, you know, as I say, people so often say to me things like, I had no idea, you know? I guess there's quite a story behind this, you know, the Parthenon. Or, you know, they're so poor, how could they afford all those antiques? Oh, God. So, yeah, it's just food for thought, if you like. But it is something we do need to give thought to. And I'm not saying we want to rule from the grave, but we want life to be simple. So for a start, I don't use PowerPoints because you can stick the flash drive in and something goes wrong, or there's a power failure, or the flash drives, they're the wrong ones, or whatever. Anything to make my life simple at the moment. So I hope, you know, and I appreciate after lunch on the last day, you've been remarkably alert. So thank you very much for your interest and the opportunity.
That was just
to come this way, because Elizabeth wants to give you something.
Oh,
We certainly appreciate
oh,
all
thank
the
you.
information that you've passed on to us and done it in such an
Oh,
entertaining
yes,
way.
here we are. Oh, what are we doing? Where do you want us?